Welcome to A Fresh Face in Hell. I'm your host, Jonathan Evison. Every week we talk to somebody new and interesting, somebody intellectually curious, somebody who will hopefully renew our faith in this cold, cruel world we live in. A Fresh Face in Hell. Welcome to A Fresh Face in Hell with Jonathan Evison. I am Jonathan Evison. Really excited about today's guest. Stephanie Land, who is the author of Maid and also the offshoot Netflix series, wildly popular, and most recently the author of Class. These books are really important to me because these books, I feel like they educate the middle up in our culture about how it is to live in poverty. I know that from my experience with writing Lawn Boy, when I would meet a lot of rich white ladies, and they'd go, I never really understood that, like, some of these decisions that people that live in poverty make. So I want to say, as the son of a single mom who grew up in working class poverty, I really admire your grit and your determination and your indefatigable will in service of your kid, both your kids now, and also your literary endeavors, following your dream. That's a tough juggling act you did.
Thank you.
So much of both of these books revolves around the idea of just the logistics of navigating poverty. People really have no understanding unless they've gone through it. It's Byzantine. I've been there. I mean, it's like, it's just rife with catch-22s. You can't get this service unless you have this voucher, but you can't get this voucher unless you have to have this voucher, but you have to take this class to get this voucher. But the problem is the date for that one's... Can you walk us through just some of the logistics of finding support as a single mom?
Oh, well, I mean, it kind of took two books to mostly be able to explain it. I think, what's really hard is people will assume that everybody has invisible support systems. I didn't. I didn't even have like a church community or family, or I didn't have parents who helped me with a down payment for a house. There's a lot of things that I think people have that they kind of like take for granted.
This is what we call entitlements. People say, I'm not entitled. I don't have any. They don't understand. They don't even know what their entitlements are because they've never had to live without that safety net. Right.
And so when I am trying to explain, how I only had $200, they have a really hard time understanding that. Especially when they learn that I'm in my late 20s, that's been one thing that I've heard a lot is like, well, what happened through all of your 20s? What were you doing? Why didn't you go to school? And weren't you working? Didn't you save money? And the answer is yes to all of those things. But, shit happens and you end up homeless with $200. And there was really nothing for me to fall back on. I had no net underneath me. And then, as you were saying before, when you go to the government and you start asking for help, it's not like you can just walk into a government office and say, I need money. Money is the very last thing that they are going to give you because we just don't trust poor people with money.
Yeah, and Michelle Obama was just saying during the DNC about the thing about the safety net and poor people living without a safety net, and this is where the class and identity sort of intercede, you know what I mean? Because when you don't have that safety net, that's what's so kind of unique about your story is that you dared to go after your dreams and navigate all this other stuff, you know what I mean? When you have that safety net, it allows you to take risks, to, follow possibilities with and potentially fall flat on your face because you know what? You got a safety net. You can land. You couldn't do that as a mother with $200. Can I ask you, because I know how I was taught while we're talking about the intersection of class and identity. And like as a child, I use the example of, when I would say, I want to go mow Mr. Austinson's lawn and he's going to pay me $10. And I would say that to my mom and she'd be like, well, you better just ask for $5 because, somebody might lowball you. Somebody might come in at 6 or 7 or 8. And so that's kind of how I was taught. And then I soon realized that my upper middle class friends that I knew, they would go to their parents and say, hey, Mr. Austinson offered me $10 to mow their lawn. And they go, well, that's a big loan. You should ask for 20. So just something as simple as that, being taught to believe in yourself and value yourself. I can, I don't, from Maid, it's hard to tell, particularly with this series, because I know from experience that they will change parental dynamics and things like that. How were you taught by your parents to in terms of valuing yourself and where you stood in the class and owning your piece of the American pie?
Well, I think my value lied in the work that I could do, not necessarily in the education that I could obtain. I was very much encouraged by my parents to move out after high school, get a job, preferably in reverse order, and support myself. And to, I asking them for money was not an option. Like I don't even think it was an option to move back in with them, if it ever came to that. It was very much, we have raised you, you're on your own, go get a job, and see you later. And it was, it's very different from how I see a lot of my friends with their kids now. It's very common knowledge that kids can't afford to support themselves right out of high school. And so I feel like it's more normal for parents to be understanding of that and allow their children to live with them for a longer amount of time, and be more understanding. And I really didn't feel like I had a lot of that. I really felt like my value was completely held as a person in my ability to support myself independently.
And that was the expectation. I mean, that's what you're raised to do, is just function as somebody who can take care of themselves rather than somebody who is taught. And I saw many of my friends taught because, I grew up in poverty. I grew up in sort of around a lot of wealthy people. And they were literally taught that destiny was a ladder and, that they were just going to climb it. So they're taught these entitlements. They're taught that you don't need to worry about that. They're very well aware that, again, it comes back to that safety net. And I think everything you're saying in your book, I think these class narratives are becoming more and more relevant because I think more and more people are just one paycheck away from that. More and more people are having to navigate that poverty. And it makes you wonder, what's the capitalist end game,
Well, I mean, I've known for years, that like before the pandemic happened, in a lot of circles for advocates with poverty and people who were in that realm and the social justice realm, the economic justice. And we talked a lot about how the majority of Americans, they threw around statistics, but it was somewhere around 70% or 75% where an unexpected bill of just $400 could offset their finances to the point where they would not be able to buy groceries, could possibly be homeless. And there was absolutely no wiggle room. And then, the pandemic started and you watched that happen in real time. And you watched people not be able to work for 2 weeks, not get a paycheck, and suddenly not be able to pay rent. And I think, something that I have kind of joked about over the years that is not funny, but it's very true, is the more white people are affected, I think the more realization that there is something that needs to change. I think that was a lot of the kind of the power in my story was it kind of forced white people to feel a little bit more vulnerable, because if it happened to me, then it could possibly happen to them or their sister or, their neighbor. It was close to home. And I have always hoped that because they have made that realization and they are possibly growing a little bit in their self and their empathy and their ability to have compassion, that, that when they hear stories about people who do not look like them, that they might be a bit more generous.
That would exactly be my mission statement for the class narratives I've written, like Lawn Boy. It's the same thing. And I was actually really hardened to go to these rich white lady book clubs and have all these women say, like, I look at things differently now. There's a tendency in our culture. I mean, we know we've seen it with the bootstrapping right forever. Just this, like, oh, they're just losers. They can't pick them up. They have no understanding of what it is, how uneven the playing field is. They've got this. They've swallowed this this mythos, this American mythos that, like, the American dream is really there for everybody. This life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness, and it was nice for me to hear people who were living cushy lives realize that, wow, I really didn't realize. I mean, I don't know what took them so long, but it was nice for them to acknowledge that I didn't know it was that way. People always, we could talk about some of the decisions that poor people make that don't make sense to white people. I mean, you could give me examples of those, I'm sure.
Yeah, I mean, they like to call them bad decisions, but there were no good decisions. I mean, I had to choose between a bad decision and an even worse decision. And so any decision that I make in a lot of the situations is, I can see why I made that choice. Was it the best choice for me at the time? Probably not, but I understand why I did it. And I'm not going to, I don't know, give people the satisfaction of saying, like, that was a bad choice, because it was the best choice that I could make in the moment. And it was what I needed at the time. And I think, we're so hard on poor people, especially poor single moms. They're every once in a while, there's a meme that goes around about, like, what's something that is acceptable when you have money and what's something that the same thing is not acceptable when you don't have money. And so, there's a lot of rules that poor people kind of have to internalize and be aware of, that they are just not allowed to have or choose, because basically poor people can't have nice things.
Yeah, what would be some specific examples, just to put a fine point on that?
I was trying to think of one. I think there's, like, multiple TVs or something, or like really big screen TVs when you're rich is fine, but when you're poor, that's trashy. Or, like you've spent all of your government checks or something on something frivolous instead of on food. And so, I mean, it goes on from there. Like, it's basically if you are doing something that is not working or living off of rice and beans, then you're not getting ahead, or you're not working to get out of the system, or, you're not working to not be this kind of leech on society. I felt that a lot. I mean, when I, back in 2010 or so, there were a lot of memes going around about drug testing welfare recipients and food stamp recipients, and then comparing us to wild animals and saying, like, if you feed wild animals, then they'll expect the handout or something like that.
You're going to habituate them. Yeah.
And so it was just this kind of common thing that, people would share. My friends would share on Facebook. And it was just like, man, is that, like, what you really think of me, the person who I just ran into last week? Like, it's just... It's really weird that we force poor people to work harder for less than what the average person has.
And as Michelle Obama also pointed out in that same speech, we're sort of taught not to complain. Like the working classes they're not the big complainers. It's usually the wealthy class that's bitching or complaining or bawling out a manager at a store or so forth, because we're not taught to, we're not allowed to occupy that space. I still say I'm doing okay now. You know what I mean? I live in my dream house and everything, but I'm such a prole at heart. Like, I'm still angry at money. Like, it took me forever to be able to even like collect any, because I was so angry at it until I finally saw, okay, well, it's just out there and it's a tool. And, you know, it's the love of money that's the evil, not just, you know, taking care of my people, you know, but I'm still like, I don't know. I guess that it's to the point it's so ingrained in me that there's almost sort of a romance with certain levels of it. I prefer if I get up, I wind up at a hoity-toity party and I always wind up back in the kitchen. You know what I mean? Because I've been running around and as I'm sure you have, in these like dog and pony literary tours, the ideas festivals in Carmel and such, where they run you around a rich donors. And I'm just like, oh my God, I cannot relate. And I will literally like wind up, you know, talking to the wait staff and back or something like that. So like smoking is a big one, right? People don't understand, like, yeah, you're not allowed to smoke if you're poor. Because, yeah, it looks like on the surface, that looks like a bad decision because it costs you about $7 for a pack of smokes and you don't have the money. So why are you smoking? But there's a good chance you're clinically depressed, you know? There's a good chance that you're working 2 jobs and that, you know, that nicotine's going to get you between shifts. Or, you know, you shouldn't be going out and eating fast food, but, that's terrible for you and it's too expensive. You should be buying, cooking at home. But, what if you have a pest problem at home and a slumlord that's not going to help you take care of that? And so cooking is no longer an option,
Yeah, well, and it's labor intensive. It's it's when you are outside of the house working or you have a long commute or kids, like by the time that we got home, it was rough. I mean, it was hard. I had about 2 hours before I had to get my daughter, into her bedtime routine. And then I would hopefully fall asleep after doing some homework and whatever I had to do. And then we get up at 6 o'clock in the morning and start all over again.
And just no help for the, I felt for you a lot too with having to even share custody. I mean, of course you needed the time, but like the idea of having to give the care of this child that you fiercely protect and do everything for to somebody you can't entirely trust.
Yeah, and people have made comments about that over the years. Like I don't think they understand that I had to, that I was legally required to. Like if I didn't, I was in contempt of court and would have fines and jail time. And even when Child Protective Services was involved, they were threatening me, with allowing her to go with him. And then I was like, but I have no choice. Like I don't know what else I'm supposed to do in this situation other than follow this parenting plan that the judge put in place.
See, that's just so harrowing for me as a father of 3. I mean, I was up until 4 a.m. worried about my 15-year-old who's really doing nothing. I mean, he's not doing any drugs. He's not drinking. He's not stealing. He's doing a lot better than I was. But like, he's just got this thing where he's got this matted hair and he won't comb it out. Now it's just like one big dog mat and he sleeps till like 3 p.m. And I think it's normal teenage stuff. But like, I am so worried about his welfare constantly, 24 hours a day, all 3 of my kids, that like, that's to me the most powerful and harrowing thing about all this is just like having to give that up because you fought everything. You did everything. And what's amazing to me is that you managed to actually keep your dreams alive at all.
Yeah, I'm not sure how. I mean, like, I think about it and I think, what was important to me was to show my kids that they could do the same thing. And I knew that I was going to be just absolutely miserable in like a 9-to-5 office job. Like, I know that about me now. Like it's just, I need, I don't really consider myself an artist so much, but like it was the type of job that would have really killed my soul if I had to do, what everybody told me to do. Like they wanted me to be a secretary or administrative assistant and, have some kind of job security, which, I still say even now with the job that I have is job security would be really nice.
Yeah, no, I mean, I know I'm a writer. We get paid twice a year, and it's like, it's hard to manage your money in between. I get paid at the beginning and the end of the year usually. And in between, I got 5 birthdays, vacations, back to school shopping, just feeding this massive brood that I've created. You said something interesting there, which led to, it's a question I keep going back to, like how we're taught. And it seems like you were making a very concerted effort, even as you were struggling through this system, to model for your child and show her that you didn't have to bow to the pressure, even though you didn't have necessarily the resources or the support. I was curious how you taught your child to view themselves and sort of self-worth and their value in the culture.
Well, I think, one thing I never really did was I never really identified as a mom. Like I would never introduce myself to someone and say, I'm so-and-so's mom. Even when that was my main job, it was still, I'm Stephanie Land. I'm a writer, or I'm, a college student or something like that. And I think it's very important to teach your kids to really be true to themselves and not let other people label you or tell you what you should be. And so, I don't know if I necessarily like sit them down and tell them that or anything, but like, I don't ever suggest that they should do one thing or another. I mean, within reason, but like.
How about the lawn mowing? What if they said that Mr. Austinson wants to mow the lawn and he's asking $10? Which side do you fall on there?
Oh, $10, great. But I would also see, like, since we can, like, see if anyone else is charging more and go with that.
That's what I mean. These are tools that this is classism at work. These are the tools. And so, like, I have this argument with my wife about I'm an easy touch. So like I'm the gift shop dad. Like I buy the $18 bag of polished rocks, and she's gonna be like, "Those are just gonna end up on the car floor." I mean, what are you doing here? And I'm like, it doesn't matter. Don't you see? This is about the idea. Because when I was a kid, a gift shop may as well have been a fucking museum. Look, don't touch. We weren't going out of there anything. It was just this idea, the possibility. I want them to feel the possibilities. I mean, and in a way, I guess I'm kind of spoiling them, but it's not the same thing as them feeling entitled to it. It's just them knowing that possibilities, that they can have what those other 4 kids going to the register can. Because I always kind of felt stigmatized by it. And I know there's a lot of stigmatization in your book as a single mother, working mother throughout both narratives. How has that changed now that you've had 2 New York Times bestsellers? You've had I know how Netflix works. I don't know how it works with a show, like if that just keeps paying out or you just get but definitely you're in a different tax bracket now. How has that changed, or has it changed your parenting or your messaging or your modeling to your kids?
I think, I don't know if it's messaging or modeling, but for me personally, it's really nice to be able to say yes. And it's really nice to be able to, for a while when Story was like 9 or 10, she really wanted to be an astronaut. And she heard about this space camp that was in like Huntsville, Alabama. And it was just like, yeah, let's do it, and it was like, I'm going to make up for all the shitty summer camps that you were in, like, for years and years. And so that lasted for a long time. Like, I think I'm starting to kind of like settle down, but like for a while it was just like, I'm trying to make up for all of these years that they were lacking and trying to finally give them things. Just, it's mostly for me. I mean, it's for them too. But like for me, it's just like, I love being able to, get them things that I know that they would really like. That's not something that is hopefully just something that they will like because they got to unwrap it.
Yeah, and it's not something you could take for granted because for so many years you couldn't do that. And also, as a respite care provider, I ended up working in-house in a lot of impoverished places, like households that didn't have refrigerators. They kept their food in a cooler and they couldn't say yes to anything for their children. And it was just so heartbreaking to me. Like, let's talk to me about the humiliations of being poor. There's just so many, and bureaucratic, social, political.
Yeah, I mean, that part of it always gets me when people try to accuse people of being fraudulent, with like just going and getting food stamps just for the hell of it. Like, you don't really understand the humiliation that's involved in, applying and having to, meet with your caseworker and then going to the grocery store and buying groceries with food stamps. Like, it's, there's a lot of stigma involved in that. And what I always thought of was like, whenever people would get all on their soapbox about like how people on food stamps shouldn't be able to buy candy or something like that. It was just like, but if I am able to buy my daughter, I mean, that was like her stocking stuffers was from food stamps. And if there was a day where I had the funds and she wanted a treat, that was one time that I could tell her yes. And it was fantastic. It was wonderful. It was, like she could finally get something that she asked for instead of me telling her, no, we don't have enough. No, we can't do that. No. And it was just, I don't think people really understand the feeling of what it's like to not just be hungry yourself and not be able to eat, but, I don't think they really understand what it's like to have a child who depends on you and not be able to feed them, not even a healthy diet, like a diet, or, not be able to give them the things that they really want, or see that they are being treated differently or they look differently, because their clothes are different than everybody else's because they're not as nice, or, Story remembers kids making fun of her in kindergarten and first grade because she had holes in all of her clothes, and I didn't even know that, until just recently. I didn't know that she was also navigating her own path of survival socially and in school, the same as I was in college.
That resonates with me because, my dad, my old man, moved us up to this wealthy community and then just left us immediately. It was his way of getting us like 900 miles away. And then he paid my mom like $200 a month child support, which was, not enough. But hey, it was something. But my mom, this was kind of a preppy community, and this is the early 80s, late 70s. And so I wanted to have some Izod slacks because that's what all the kids were wearing. And so my mom found this pair of white Izod slacks at the church rummage sale. But where the little alligator is, the little, there was a little tab there that was like the special thing. There was a spaghetti stain on it. And I walked into school the first day, and Andrew Holbert, who ended up being my friend, he was a great guy. He didn't mean anything by it. He was just like, hey, I recognize those pants. You got those at the church rummage sale. It's like, that's my first impression. The stigma is still with me. Like I got a couple of these EBT cards for each of my kids, during the course of the pandemic, and I still felt like stigmatized using them. You know what I mean? I was like, honey, will you do it? Will you use it? I still had that. And on the subject, it just these are things that never really go away. Like my mom, being able to say yes. My mom still feels so guilty. She's 93 now. She just survived. She lives with us. Just survived stage 4 cancer. She gives me like $7 every time I leave the house, or like $6, or just some weird amount of money, like everything she has, so I can use it for gas or get a cheeseburger. I don't have the heart to tell her a cheeseburger is like $12 now. But like, I know that's the most painful thing to ever say to a child is no. I mean, you know what I mean? And to have to do it over and over. Your story makes me so happy that like you've got to a place that like you could do astronaut camp, because every kid deserves astronaut camp, but only the fortunate.
Yeah. I was telling my friends in my group chat the other day is Story is taking tennis lessons now. And so she's, we've got a horse and she does riding lessons, and now she's doing tennis lessons. And I'm just like, who the fuck am I? Like, I'm like one of those people whose kids are doing tennis and riding. And it's so weird.
See, you're so working class that you feel guilty about it. I would feel the same way. It's just like, oh God, I'm the thing I hate, but not really. You're just giving your kids what their friend, you're just trying to give them social currency. You know what I mean? Like, let them just be like other kids. I mean, I have so much anxiety, as I said, with my kids now. I don't think people would realize just the amount of just anxiety and depression and isolation that you had to deal with going through this whole thing with no safety net, where your help is this, labyrinthine bureaucratic mess. I mean, can I ask you about what you see as some of the systemic failures, or how they could be improved upon for people that had to go down your path? I mean, what would you do to improve it for a future generation of single moms?
Well, I mean, beyond universal childcare and all that, the work requirements are stupid. I mean, the fact that I had to prove that I was working 20 hours a week in order to get what comes out to be, I think, $1.93 per person per meal per day. And so it's this whole attitude of poor people having to work to earn a tiny little amount of assistance. Bill Clinton he was the worst with welfare reform, because he started this phrase, welfare to work. But historically, somewhere around 75-80% of people who are on food stamps are working. And they're working families, and they're trying to feed their kids. And it's really not that they're not working, it's that they're not getting paid enough. And so, I mean, it's not a lack of work ethic. I think most people want to have a job and so they can provide for their families. But, when you're working for $9 an hour, I mean, minimum wage is still $7.25. And it's not enough to pay the bills. And so you need help. But just adding this whole extra layer of paperwork for everything. I mean, it's in everything. It's for health insurance, for Medicaid. I had to prove that I was working for childcare. I had to prove I was working for food.
It's like you're on parole.
I mean, it's they stopped making it easy, of course, where like if you qualified for food stamps, then you qualified for a lot of other things automatically. I mean, that was nice for a while because you could just give them your case number or something, and then you were automatically qualified for LIHEAP, or the thing that you get help for utilities and heating bills. But then they quit that. And so you suddenly had 5 different caseworkers in 5 different buildings. And all of these meetings were during the workday. And so...
Yeah, when you're supposed to be banking your 20 hours.
Right. So I had to take off work to get these, small amounts of assistance from 5 or 7, at one time it was 7 different places.
And so, I mean, how many hours a week do you estimate you're spending on this? Almost as half of what you're working? I mean, 10 hours, 12 hours, if you add up the meetings, the time away from work, you got to drive there and be back, the making of the appointments, the meetings with social workers. I mean, that in itself is like a part-time job.
Oh yeah, I mean, you don't have the privilege of time. You're impoverished of time because everything is so much harder. You can't buy things in bulk. You probably can't fill your gas tank because you don't have enough money to do that. So you're stopping to get gas a lot more. Like it just goes on and on and on. Like just how expensive it is to be poor. Because of all of these extra little requirements that are required to, be able to just survive the day or the month, or, I don't think I really thought further into the future than the month. Because it was just like, I had to get those bills paid.
Yeah, well, that's an interesting, you bring up a really good point about the time and just the butterfly effect of that, just like having to stop extra for gas, having to not being able to do things, having to shop more often because you can't just go to Costco and, drop $800 and, we're good. Just if we're out up here, just go down to the walk-in freezer. I just think I want to read more books like this. And I think it's so important that people see the realities of it so that we can, because it plays so heavily into the culture wars, I think, And people are making all these assumptions about poverty that they don't understand. And I'm trying to figure out how to ask this question. I want to go to the literary part of this. So now your literary ambitions predate single motherhood, predate your abusive relationship, predate everything. At what age did you know that you wanted to write? And at what age did you decide that you were going to write about your life? So far, that's what it's been. You've been more of a memoirist. I don't know what you have planned for the future, but like, when did this happen in your life?
I was in the fourth grade. I had a teacher named Mr. Birdsall, and he forced us to keep a journal, and like so much. We wrote like short stories, we wrote essays, we wrote, all year. It was just writing, and that was when I knew, like, it was just like, oh, this is what I need, and it was not like, oh, this is fun. It was, I absolutely need to write in order to breathe and to process life. And it was just, from that point on, I was a daily journal writer. And I don't really, I dabbled in fiction and poetry, and I hope nobody ever reads those things. And like, it's just not, natural for me to kind of make stuff up. Memoir is really unique and challenging in its own way, just because it's kind of a mix of, you can say that from memory is not exactly entirely how it happened. Because everybody has their own filter, everybody has, so I have tried really hard, throughout my life, but, especially as I'm working professionally as a writer and when I was writing in school, was to just remain as authentic as I possibly could. There's a lot of different opinions on, how do you put dialogue in a book that, you're writing a conversation that happened 10 years ago.
Right. I always say it's all fiction on some level, but, because we can't have photographic fidelity, but a memoir, the dictates of memoir, make you stick as close to the fact as possible. I find that interesting. I'm the opposite that way. First of all, third grade for me, my third grade teacher, Mrs. Hanford, saved my life. My sister, who was my primary caregiver because she was the oldest daughter, my mom was all checked out. She died in a freak car accident on her 16th birthday. And that's when my dad moved us up here and then left. And so I had all these outside forces going, and I was literally climbing the walls. Probably would have been medicated if they were doing that in 1976. And Mrs. Hanford, just in order to kind of control her class, she just let me sit in a corner and just write because she saw I liked it. But for me, it's interesting. You said you processed. For me, it was pure escapism. You know what I mean? I needed it. I found that I needed it to escape this. So I find it, even to this day, the themes I write about I explore my own traumas and my own, the themes that have shaped my life. But I always sort of require this sort of distance that fiction offers. You got to face it in a different way. And I want to talk a little bit about that because that seems, I don't have the skill set to do that. Well, you say you don't feel like you have the skill set to do fiction. I want to talk about what it takes to have you have to be very unsentimental about stuff, right?
Yeah. I enjoy being self-aware and analyzing everything to death, probably. I'm also just very introverted, and I really don't talk much in real life. My job is weird for that. It was how I kept myself company. It was, I always had someone to hang out with as long as I had a pen and paper, or a book to read. And even the books that I read, well, I did go through a pretty heavy Stephen King phase in high school, but for the most part, beyond that, it was nonfiction and memoir and anything that I could get my hands on that was really realistic. And I think just because humans are interesting to me, and it's something I still do. I'll still go back and right now I'm like journaling feverishly because I have a book deadline. I have another book that I need to write in a year, and it's like I haven't written anything in a long time, and I really need to like dump out all of this garbage that's in my head, and a lot of it is just like going back and doing this work, before I can make it into something that people actually want to read. And it's just like, well, why did I do that? And what was going on there? And I'm a huge fan of therapy and just I don't know. I think it's interesting, like the things that we do and the ways that we react to situations and how everybody is different. It's just, I don't know. I just like it.
It is therapeutic. You are learning. You even in just going through your own life with a microscope and setting it down for the edification or entertainment or of these other people, you are becoming more expansive, right? I mean, like, it's not just an exercise in organization, right? I mean, when you look back on the events that you lived through and you put them down on paper, do you see them differently now? Do you see them with a little distance in a way that is different than you saw when you were in the storm?
Yeah, I mean, there was one thing that happened in writing Maid. I mean, the first draft I wrote, we were still living in low-income housing. I was still a single mom, 2 kids, and it was only what, like, I think I had been off of food stamps for 6 months by the time I got the book deal for Maid. And so I was still very much living the life that I was writing about. But, after you get the first draft done and then you get the edits from your editor and all of that, like, I was in a different place. I had moved out of that apartment, had a house, and I was able to go back and feel a lot of compassion for myself, because I had the beginnings of a new sense of normalcy, and saw that the way that I had lived life was incredibly hard and not necessarily what everybody else was doing, and so I felt a little bit less of a failure.
Yeah, you kind of got to forgive yourself because it seems like you can feel, I'm guessing here, but like when you feel in any way that you're failing somebody who's depending on you, you're going to be really hard on yourself, right?
Yeah, I mean, it was kind of like this black hole of shame, and I wanted to be a contributing member to society. Like, that was a huge thing for me. I wanted to do the things that my parents had expected me to do, is, to live independently. And that meant not being on government assistance. And so to have to rely on other means of support as a way to eat felt I felt a lot of shame about that, and like I was failing my daughter especially.
But this has such a happy ending. Now you get to, you know what I mean? Now it's like, I told you so. Now, where do you go next? I mean, are you going to continue to tell your story as you've been telling it? I mean, I know the readers want to know just but then does it offer the same challenges and hurdles? I mean, are we going to get to read about Stephanie Land's journey into success, for instance, which is fraught in its own way, I'm sure. I mean, with what limited amount of success I've enjoyed, it's a different sort of fraught. But like, is that something you're interested in writing? Because you said you don't really want to write fiction.
Yeah.
Or are you thinking more personal, like narrative essay, or do you think you're going to write your life more?
Well, I mean, I started at the beginning of the year. Everybody on book tour, they ask you what's next. It's like you hadn't just finished something and you kind of need to revel in that. But like, what I started saying was I want to write for fun again. And so I started, I I traditionally or historically have had someone do my newsletter for me because it's just something that I'm like basically allergic to. And I took it over. Like I changed all the passwords and started writing in this Substack and called it The Privilege to Feel, because that was kind of a line that fell out of me in writing class was saying I didn't have the privilege to feel in that moment. Like I didn't have the privilege to be angry or to be sad or anything, because I absolutely had to work and get through the day and do what needed to be done. But also, in a lot of the resilience training and that, you're very much taught to accept whatever they give you and not complain. And so, I kind of started writing about the lasting trauma of poverty, and just, because I end up talking to a lot of people about it. My day job is technically a public speaker. I travel around and do keynotes for fundraisers for organizations, and a lot of the times when we have Q&A sessions, there's a lot that people do just because they don't trust things, and they'll still have a budget in every notebook that they have just so that they know that everything is okay. Or they'll be a little bit extra with taking care of their car or double checking things. And there's a lot of ways that trauma follows you when it was something about, being able to survive in some way. And so I think I can talk about it at this point. There's always like this waiting period that you have before you can like actually publicly talk about things. But I have another book that's coming out. It is going to be a collection of essays, and it's called The Privilege to Feel, and it's really about looking into how the body holds trauma, and where that is, and how it comes out. And it's, there's a lot of talk about the body keeping the score and, triggers and all of that. But like, it's your body trying to protect you is how I see it. And every once in a while it can't. And I started to feel so much compassion for my own body and just myself, and the like down to like my lymphatic system and just how much my body is trying to protect me from feeling things. And so it's something that I'm really interested in. And so I'm going to go back in my life and like pick out all of these like most traumatic things, like the thing that gave me PTSD or, like all of these things, and really look at how I didn't really have any time to process any of that until just recently,
And that's how trauma works. I mean, when you're traumatized, you're almost more like in shock, almost like fight or flight. In terms of the faculties to deconstruct, this sounds like a really healthy move. I mean, I think this is something everybody should write, is that, that's what trauma will do. Once you're in a place where you have the privilege to think about this, it just wants to relive itself again and again. And to me, the best antidote to that would be to write about it.
Yeah, but there's also a lot of things that people do for themselves that are very expensive, in like a lot of ways. Like I finally broke down and started trying acupuncture recently. And so as a person who has chronic pain, I have scoliosis, and everybody would say like, oh, have you tried acupuncture? And I was like, no, I haven't fucking tried acupuncture. Like it's
$150 a session.
Yeah, like, and it's an hour and a half, like where those two things are unaffordable to me. And I couldn't even take a bath. Like there was no self-care. There was no like treat yourself. There was like, I could barely afford to get myself some ice cream when I was getting my kid, some ice cream. And so to put, the work requirements, all of these expectations and telling them what they can and can't have, and these rules and regulations and how to act, and then we expect them to be okay. Like, they're not. Poor people are not okay. And there's so much privilege in being able to process trauma and being able to, do something as simple as get a massage, that you might actually really need in order to do your job better, especially if it's a physical job. But I couldn't do that. There was no way. So I took handfuls of ibuprofen instead.
Yeah, we talked to Jamie Ford about, he went to trauma camp.
Oh, really?
You know what I mean? Which was something he could only afford to do once he was a New York Times bestseller kind of thing. But it was totally regenerative for him. But these are one of these solutions. Again, it wasn't until you talked about resiliency training. At what point in your life did you do that, and what did that comprise?
Well, I think this concept of resiliency is something that we assign to poor people. I think, it's an expectation that we place on them to survive and be superhuman, as a single mom, especially. Like, I was doing the work of 2 adult people. And it was like, that was expected of me. People actually would tell me, like, I never have to worry about you because I know that you're doing it and you're okay and you're strong. And I was like, I would appreciate a little bit of worry sometimes, like, check in on me, like, see if I need anything. But it was also, I had a mantra that was, you must not allow yourself to fall apart. And it was just like, that was some kind of weakness. If I had mental health issues, if, my kid's dad caused me to have a panic attack, or if I got angry that my appointment was canceled, in the middle with this social worker that I took off work for, and it seemed like as soon as I was angry about something, that was when I was shown the door, because it was, oh, you're not being grateful, you're not accepting all of this, assistance that we're offering you. I very much felt like I had to be this, like, Oliver Twist character. And that's erasing my experience. That's erasing how hard it is. And and I think so, like, with poor people especially, it's overwhelming, like, to try and figure out how to help, because there's so many systemic things in place, and it's, heavily tied to racism, and it's been going on for generations. And so what are you supposed to do? And so I think, I don't know, in the late 2000s, like around 2010 or something, this resilience kind of started popping up, of kids are really resilient, like, poor people are really resilient, like, they can get through anything. And there was a lot of expectation there to help yourself, and I think that is incredibly unfair. And it's just not recognizing that, instead of expecting the systems in place to support them and to be strong and those systems to be resilient, instead we're expecting a single mom of 2 kids who's, cleaning houses for a living to be strong.
Yeah, and meanwhile, I mean, one of my biggest themes in all my books is deadbeat dads. Like, I want to do an episode just on the failures of men, toxic masculinity, all this expectation on women in general to be superhuman versus guys, just even as little boys, from the time we're little boys, just sort of given a break. Boys will be boys. Like, the expectation for women, let alone single mothers, just women across the board is so much higher. They're expected to be stoic. They're expected to absorb. They're expected to not be angry, or they're historical, whereas men can just fly off the handle and, it's, he's the man. He's, what I mean? It's like, this could be another hour conversation in its own. I really appreciate you joining us. I know now that I know you're an introvert too, I know how I do a lot of speaking gigs and I go home and I'm just full of self-loathing. Everyone thinks I like it, but I don't. Like after this podcast, I'm going to go home and put a head over my pillow because I'm like, oh, I say such stupid shit all the time. But I really appreciate your willingness to join us, to field these questions. We didn't stay on your book. I asked you a lot of personal questions, and I really appreciate you being open. That's what I'm trying to do here is explore, the broader subject, and your books offered us the perfect opportunity to do that. So we want to thank Stephanie Land. I mean, if you're that one or two people in the universe who has not read or seen Maid, the miniseries, the book is better. It's always better. But the series is fine as well. Very good. And Class, which I confessed I still have 40 pages to go, but is equally great. It just dropped in paperback. So thank you, Stephanie Land, for joining us. You were indeed a fresh face in hell.
Thank you. I don't think I've ever been called that before.
A Fresh Face in Hell with Jonathan Evison is brought to you by Fresh Face TV and produced by Jason Botkin and yours truly. Check us out on Instagram. Find us on YouTube. Like and subscribe. If you love the podcast, by all means, run out and buy all of Jonathan Evison's award-winning novels, available wherever books are sold.